All right, that is pretty much an Arkham retrospective, if you will.
Yeah.
Aside from that, for what I've actually been doing, and I've binge watched this, is because Netflix is pushing this very hard. They've got a lot of stuff coming out, and a lot of movies as well, which I probably need to watch, even though people say they're bad, but whatever. I binge watched Altered Carbon. This is their I guess they're really pushing this very hard as like their standalone, like very sci-fi tech type of show that they kind of want to push. Just reading the plot summary from IMDb. Set in the future where consciousness is digitized and stored, a prisoner returns into a new life and new body and must solve a mind-bending murder to win his freedom. So that's kind of the general premise of the film, the TV show. I think it's about 10 episodes, and I thought it was pretty good. I didn't think it was like, changing the industry or anything, or, but I think it's pretty well done, pretty well shot, especially special effects. I don't know like how much money Netflix has, but like it has a really cool world where like it looks like Blade Runner, but it looks like something like Shadowrun or even like early Deus Ex, where it's kind of had these like, it's kind of like, it's scummy, but it feels more attuned to like what the future actually would be like, instead of like high fantasy sci-fi, which is like everything's clean, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I watched Altered Carbon last week, so it's not as fresh in my mind at the moment. But yeah, like I think I completely agree. Like I think a lot of the show isn't groundbreaking, as you say, but it does like the genre justice kind of thing. Like it has all the tropes. It also does. This is the thing I actually really like about. I think I always say with Netflix shows, because there's always like a limited amount. There'll be like an episode where it's like the character is in a room and the whole episode kind of happens in a room kind of thing. And there's like the torture episode where he's getting tortured in like virtual reality.
And then there's the flashback episode. Like I feel like there is structure in like a lot of these TV shows now, where like they're just like, we have to have one episode that's singular to this character, or we're gonna have all flashback. Like even to like Walking Dead, that came back, and it's like second episode back. It had a weird structure where it was segmented like it is in the Game of Thrones books, where it's each like few minutes it says the person's character's name, like Rick, and it'd be like 10 minutes about Rick and what he's doing, and then to go 10 minutes to somewhere else. So I find that very interesting, like how people play around, and even Walking Dead does that a lot. With someone where they're just like, we're just going to focus on these characters and have this little thing and have that interaction with them. But yeah, Ulta Carbon does that in a particular way, because it is Joel Kinnaman's story, or Takeshi, which by the way, to not confuse anyone, Takeshi, so like it's hard to explain, but basically you get these little things, your memory, the stacks, and they're in it's in your brain, and you get uploaded to the consciousness or whatever, the cloud. So technically, Takeshi is actually...
it's not the cloud, actually. It's more like, I guess, we'll go explain it and I'll clarify.
Yeah, but essentially Takeshi is, an Asian man? He got killed, and then he comes back 250 years onwards, and he's played by Joel Kinnaman, which is a white guy. So it's not just like, oh, he's appropriating things. It's like, no, this is what happened, dude.
Yeah, like, well, the thing that's also so it's, the main character's name is Takeshi Kovac, which is, he's half Japanese and half Serbian. So maybe somebody might think like, oh, like Kovac, like in the body of, Joel Kinnaman, isn't that weird? But like, he is actually like an Asian, like man, like a Japanese man. But he has his brain, I guess digitized in what in the universe is known as a stack, which is kind of like, a platform in your, body that kind of keeps your consciousness. And, if your body dies, like if you get shot in the head or something like that, there's like a backup of your consciousness in your, stack that's in your body, and you can just take that out and put it in a new sleeve or a new body, is what they call it. Like it's pretty visceral. I think the, TV series, like it's very much like, hey, like, the world has kind of embraced this, and we just kind of are doing what we want now because we can live more or less forever. there's a lot of, focus on like, how people would be in the future where it's like, people would become like really greedy, it's hyper focus on like, sex and like, pleasure and, taking drugs and stuff like that to cope with, having to deal with all this kind of stuff. So it is supposed to be a dystopian kind of,
Future.
cyberpunk. Cyberpunk is supposed to be defined by, this kind of dystopian mindset. But, I remember reading online, people were arguing that, it is actually post-cyberpunk. And, the difference between post-cyberpunk and cyberpunk is post-cyberpunk is a more, grounded, and more realistic and more optimistic view on what a cyberpunk future would be like. And I think Ulta Carbon kind of is more like that. Like, obviously, like, there's the dystopian elements, like, people resort to drugs and, all the, like, related crimes that kind of develop from that kind
Actually,
of living forever.
You know what that reminds me of? Actually, like, it's probably a better mirroring of Blade Runner and Shadowrun is actually, the 2012 movie Dredd. It feels more akin to that type of world where it's like it does have this drug heavy focus. It is kind of futuristic, but it's not so much like too futuristic where it's a little bit like that's what I like about it, where it does feel like it does have those natural human elements but it doesn't feel too far out of sci-fi where it's like, whoa, where did this come from? Another thing that I really do like is like, once again, is the Asian influence of it. 'Cause like I really like how like in some of the episodes they have like katanas, they have like ninja stars. It does feel like a weird like early 90s like TV show, like where it's like Asian influence, but like in sci-fi. Like I feel it harnesses that idea and concept really well. I do know that Ulta Carbon is a book series. I can't talk about how accurate it is to the TV show, but yeah,
neither. I was gonna say like Ulta Carbon, like Blade Runner is like kind of the father of modern cyberpunk or the cyberpunk genre in general. But it influenced Ghost in the Shell, again like a Japanese cyberpunk series about becoming cyborgs and whatnot, and also The Matrix, which is also another kind of Asian influenced cyberpunk futuristic world as well. So like it's just like all the series just have a different like axiom that they kind of focus on. Like in Altered Carbon, it's about stacks. In The Matrix, it's about the people being
batteries.
Not the batteries. I don't like the battery concept. I preferred the original concept of The Matrix, which was that humans were actually used by the robots as biological processing processes, so to speak. So like, because like the brain is super complex, so the human brain is complex, robots use it to power their systems, and like kind of that's the original reason why humans were collected. But they I think like when they tried to review it, they're like, oh, audiences aren't gonna understand this, so alright, we'll just make it like they're their power source, even though like heat energy is like a really poor way to use like utilize energy, especially from like living beings, because they still need to be fed. You might as well just use like what you're going to feed them as a source of energy rather than their heat energy, if that makes sense.
You're going to the deep hole of like, this sci-fi actually doesn't make any sense.
Well, no, Matrix, the plot of the Matrix and why the took them doesn't make sense, but like Altered Carbon, like Altered Carbon is a far more simplistic axiom. It's just like stacks exist, we got there. It doesn't explain how we got there. It's just the idea exists. Okay, let's see where it goes.
Yeah, that's why I do like your explanation of it, where you said it was simple, because that's how I put like Altered Carbon, where it's like, yeah, of course it's not as good as Blade Runner or any of these it's contemporaries, but it's like it's fine. It does its job, it's a good setting.
Well, the thing is, like, I was gonna say, like, I mentioned this in our Blade Runner, podcast. I forget which number that was on, but, I think, Blade Runner is like a really good story, but like, it's aged quite a lot, and I think this is kind of like the modern side of cyberpunk, right? In the sense that to get like people's attention to what cyberpunk is, despite being made like, I guess like 15 years ago now, 2002, when the first novel came out. It is a far more like relatable. It kind of catches the human condition a lot better. Whereas like, in Blade Runner, like the axiom is, okay, there are AI that exists that have gone rogue and you're following, a Blade Runner whose job is to execute them. Whereas Ulta Carbon, it's more complex, but it kind of, it is kind of like what you want out of Blade Runner. It's like, hey, I want to know more about this world and what's happening. And we kind of got that with the new Blade Runner, 2049. We kind of found out, oh, hey, look, this is what's new with the world. And, AIs are kind of, well, like the, Blade Runners, are openly robots and they know that, and they have AI companions. And in this in this TV show, it's about, there's like religions that exist that, have a coding that, they want to die permanently, like when they get killed, so their stacks are immediately destroyed because they don't believe in
reincarnation, I suppose, or coming back.
It's
just coming back from the dead. And I think that, on that point, that's what I really like about this show is I do like the world building in this show, and that is so key, especially when it comes to fantasy or sci-fi, is when they have a good world and they build upon it and you want to know more about it. Like, I really found it interesting when it was there in the first episode, and that's how they generally get you hooked in the first episode. But the bit where our main guy, Joel Kinnaman's character, Kovac, goes to the AI controlled hotel, and everyone's like, yeah, no one goes there because it's like abandoned, whatever it is. But like, I found that idea, and there's different AI hotel owners, and they all meet up together. I love that idea. Like, I really enjoyed that whole idea of the AI people, and it comes all together of these people who being like natural humans, bio-enhanced humans, all the way to like AI humans. Like, I found that whole thing really cool, the whole world of Ulta Carbon, and I did want to see a little bit more, I guess.
Yeah, I was actually a really big fan of Poe, Edgar Allan Poe, in the which is like the hotel that he stays at, the Raven, I believe.
Yeah, because the whole Edgar Allan Poe, that makes a lot of sense now. Like, I'm like, yeah, he looks like him. Oh wait, it is a whole point.
It is him. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, I thought it was the case, but I was like, they only refer to him as Poe, so I thought, oh, maybe it's just like a reference. But it's like, no, it is supposed to be Edgar Allan Poe, and it's like sort of be very on the nose of who his character is supposed to be. Yeah, like supporting characters. I really like the sister. I forget her name, the actress's name, but
she's an Australian.
Is she Australian?
Really? The Ditchin Lashman. I'm looking at the IMDb. Yeah, she's Australian because she was in Neighbours, and like I remember seeing it. I'm like, okay. Yeah, that girl was in Neighbours.
Oh, okay. I don't watch Neighbours, so
hey, she was in Neighbours in like 2003, 2004, like a long time ago. But yeah, I remember seeing her. I think I don't know. To me, her character is a little bit weird. Like, I don't necessarily believe her intentions, because her intentions is because you find out backstory and later on that, like, her and her brother are very close together because of pretty much of a bad upbringing. But I feel like the motivations for her to do all these, I guess, villainous stuff is to get his brother back. I felt like it's very flimsy in a sense. Like, I didn't necessarily believe she goes all this way just to be like, I want to see you again, brother. Like, I feel like I feel like it would be a better concept if it was like that was her girlfriend, like ex girlfriend or something, and was like crazily like possessive. Because like you do have that whole flashback episode thing, which I didn't necessarily get throughout the whole kind of series of the tribe that tried to take over the government beforehand, and then there was that.
What about it?
Yeah, I know. I just felt like I didn't feel like I got a really good explanation from who they are. Like, I understood where it was like, we're the resistance, we want to stop this whole thing. And then, I think in episode 3, when they're at that mansion party, the guy's like, yeah, you're the last thing of this thing, the last of your tribe or whatever. And everyone's like, oh my god, like, this guy.
Yeah, I forget. I think something beginning with an up.
Yeah, I never got the whole big deal about that was. I think that was the one weak point where I'm like, I don't understand what this whole thing was about.
I think, it was very vague. But I think, like, in the end, there was essentially people who were able to utilize their mind and like their bodies, because of course, again, like this whole show always comes back to the stack, and that the body isn't important. It's about control of your mind, right? And so these people were basically able to utilize their mind to their maximum capacity, and that's the reason why they were able to overthrow, or at least attempt to try and overthrow, the government's, or like the modern human, like conglomerate, or whatever they called it, because they saw the creator of the stacks, who you later find out to be the leader of the resistance. She sees the future just being plunged into, like, you know, basically what it becomes. Like, Takeshi kind of wakes up and he's like, yeah, shit, my mentor, like, predicted this and everything's exactly how it is. Yeah, and they wanted to basically stop that because they kind of saw it leads people to turn to degeneracy. But yeah, like, again, that's all very, so, like, it's very philosophical within the nature of the world, whether or not that's okay for humanity to go down that path, if it means, you know, like, we get spread into the universe more, which is what the whole reason the stacks were created for. It was created for space travel. So, you know, even though space travel took, like, I don't know, like 300 a million years or whatever, it doesn't matter. Like, you won't age, you can just go into another body. And their whole goal was to prevent this current future, and they failed. And that's why he's important, because he was one of the few people who were taught how to. He was basically Neo. I think that's the way I kind of saw it.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Like, I'm like, I know he's special and he has some sort of skill, but I don't know why he specifically has it. But yeah, like that whole part kind of confused me a bit.
I think it's because, and you find out with the reveal, because he was trained by the creator of stacks. That's the reason why him and his team were so adept at handling other people, and he's able to, like, you know, he kind of says that, oh, like, I can tell, like, you know, what you're thinking based on, like, your pattern and behavior and stuff. And, like, again, like, the whole reason why he knows it is because it's like the creator is, like, going through the manual with him and telling him, okay, this is, like, how you read this. I think that's the way I've interpreted. But, like, it doesn't really play too much of a role, like, after the whole murder thing happens, like, after he solves the murder of
which, by the way, really good starting premise. Like, I kind of wish that that was kind of more that, and like the whole season was kind of that, and then like up to season 2 there was a weird backstory of like kind of like what's going on with this shadow organization. But like, once again, I think everything's kind of, yeah, I guess closely connected. So how do you feel about the love interest, the Kirsten chick, the very religious, not getting resurrected? I thought she had a pretty good motivation and a pretty good character, you know, and I guess a good even because like what is it? Kovac's kind of body is her boyfriend of the time that died and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Her partners, like, essentially. So I think it's Kirsten Ortega. She's essentially a cop that works at the police force in the future. I forget what the area is called, but
either way, like every other futuristic government, it's always corrupt.
Yeah, of course, right. And she's just like, I'm not gonna stand for this corruption, and turns in their badge and gun nut.
Yeah, the more and more I think about this, the more I think about this, the more I feel like it is Dredd, basically. Like, have you watched the new movie? Like, it's not new, but like
I watched the new Dredd. I haven't watched the movie that it's based on. The Philippines movie, I think it is.
I'm not quite sure what that is, because there was the comic book, there's this Stallone movie, and then there's like the newish movie, but still.
Yeah, well, Dredd's the new movie with I forget the actor.
Carl Urban.
Yeah, like that movie was basically kind of takes the concept from like I think it's like a Philippines film where it's like, I think it's called like The Block, or like
The Raid.
The Raid.
Oh, well, that whole thing is because those movies came out the exact same year, and I think it was very incidental in how that worked. I'm pretty sure, because like for a movie to go into production all the way to like coming out the exact same year, there's no way someone else would copy and like quickly be like, quick. It was just complete coincidence. But The Raid is more like, it's heavy, just more like, oh yeah, we've got one big apartment complex and we're just taking them down. And I think Dredd has a lot more, I guess, social commentary, especially in the more futuristic things. And it's done differently, but, you know, it does have...
Does it not happen in an apartment complex?
Yes, but, once again, it's my favorite type of genre. It's basically, it's Die Hard, you know?
Basically Die Hard. Yeah, true.
Everything comes back to, like, being restricted to certain areas and then trying to fight your way out. So, you know, it's that whole thing. But once again, continue of Kristen's character.
I was just gonna say, I like her character in it. She is kind of like a bit stereotyped in the sense that, like, oh yeah, she's just like she doesn't like the system and she's gonna fight against it. But like, she's definitely a good kind of springboard for Takeshi to kind of bounce off. And there's obviously like a conflict because you find out, oh well, Takeshi's in her ex-boyfriend's body, and that's the reason why like she cares so much about him despite not caring about the stack that's in the body. But yeah, like, and obviously they get into a bit of a romance and stuff, but I mean, it's like, I think in the end it's like, I think I found it more interesting, I think the guy who has the daughter, who's like...
Yeah, his best friend he's not really best friend, but his partner in crime, Vernon, I think?
Yeah, Vernon, that's right, yeah Vernon. Like, I think I think the thing between him and his wife is far more interesting because essentially his wife is a hacker, and Takeshi gets her back in order to help them with like a big mission that they have planned, but because they only give people, like the government only provides like sleeves like that are available, she gets put into the body of a man. So it is kind of, I guess, making a little bit of like a commentary about like, you know, I guess like trans people and how it would feel to be in like the wrong body and stuff, but like in that kind of cyberpunk future, because it's like a thing that kind of either happens a lot or, you know, it happens because people are kind of like, why not? I'm rich enough to go into whoever's body. It's kind of like becomes normal. So it's quite interesting to see like the kind of how they deal with all that. So I find that far more interesting in terms of...
Well, that's the thing. I found the whole daughter thing pretty interesting. I kind of got lost in it a little bit because like I felt like the whole daughter subplot about trying to find, like, I don't know, for some reason I must have tuned out or something. I didn't really understand the whole point of her build up to her character and being basically, she was kind of like a semi-savior and basically kicks ass.
Yeah, well, I think, again, I kind of get her thing because, you know, she was kind of related to the plot because she was killed by one of the characters in the show, and she's related to the investigation. And then Poe basically like does a Morpheus on her and turns her into like Neo. I think the daughter is actually in Riverdale from memory.
Yeah, she's
like one
the
of the
Pussycats, yeah.
Yeah, because that was like the first, like, hey, aren't you from Riverdale? What are you doing?
It's like I know that hair from anywhere.
Yeah, but yeah, like I kind of felt her character got rushed at the end. I feel like they should have built that up a little bit more. Something like that. It's
yeah, because
like,
that's why I had the confusion where it's like, oh, there's a little bit of build up of like who she is, like coming from where she'd come from. Then all of a sudden at the end, where everything's kind of high stakes, she's like, yeah, you know, let me go out. I'm like, whoa, what's going on here? That was the big confusion for me. I'm like, I don't understand where you're going from this.
I mean, I immediately saw like the moment Poe was like teaching her how to protect herself, that by the end, like she was going to become like a fighting machine. I just didn't expect her like, I don't know how I felt about the big, showdown at the, like, I guess...
Space station thing, whatever it is.
Yeah, the satellite thing. I kind of felt like that, like, I definitely liked the concept of it, like, it was like this ship that, like, the sister owned, and basically used to basically, peddle, like, you know, being able to, like, kill, like, you know, someone that you hire like a prostitute and you're able to like kill them, and then they're like, oh, do you want like, you know, some like a child or something like that? And I'm just like, you know, I felt sick, and I could imagine like being in the world, how sick you would feel hearing that as well, and having to kind of deal with that kind of stuff. But it's like, yeah, it's supposed to be like the future where you're rich, and they have stacks and people can do whatever they want because they've got like, I don't know, unlimited resources and are in space and shit. So I don't know. I can definitely see it being quite creepy. And again, it kind of goes back to the human condition. And if you do kind of feel something that's weird and odd and it does make you feel those things, it's like, yeah, that's how you know you're human. And you haven't been altered carbon yet.
Oh God. You had to do that, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. Of course I did.
Well, that's the thing. Like, I felt like it did, like, overall, it did feel like it's a pretty good show. I felt like maybe the last 2 episodes felt a little bit rushed or something was going on.
Mm-hmm.
And once again,
Yeah.
I do feel like when they introduced the sister and I guess, like, her whole, like, plan, I'm like, that was kind of like, okay, whatever. Once again, I liked the whole part where it's, like, discovering the murder mystery. I think that was kind of me liking that. And obviously, apparently there's 2 more books in the series. I don't know if they're going to follow into that, but, you know, obviously I feel like they've got a relatively good-ish hit, Netflix has, so.
Yeah. I think it did like, I don't think I've heard anything bad about the show other than like, you know, I think, and I would agree to this, like I remember reading that, like, yeah, it's kind of a little bit like, hey, let's just get like Caesar statistics, again, going back to how I reckon Netflix does thing, it's like it's like, what are some things that we know, people like? All right, they like cyberpunk. All right, what's our demographic that likes this? Okay, who's an actor people like, who are cheap and we can get together. Like, I'm pretty sure, like, for example, like the daughter from Riverdale, like Riverdale does a lot of stuff on Netflix. So they probably like, hey, do you want to work on this project? And she's like, yeah, why not? So I think the way it's created, like, yeah, maybe it might feel quite like manufactured to like hit that demographic, but I think again, it does a good job at it. So you definitely can't fault Netflix for its execution of this. As you said before, we don't know how, I guess,
It works.
how close it is. Yeah, no, well, how close it is to the actual book. You know, it kind of reminds me of iRobot. You know, iRobot with Will Smith literally has nothing to do with the iRobot the book, because I read the book like maybe like a year later after watching that.
And you're like, hey, there's no Will Smith in this.
There's no Will Smith. Well, iRobot is like a short. It's like a bunch of short stories related to the issue of.
So it's like what, World War Z and that book, because that book is pretty much all vignettes of just a zombie apocalypse, and that World War Z movie was like, it's a good movie, but I'm like, man, this is not the book.
Well, the thing is, there's one character in iRobot who is essentially supposed to be the robopsychologist, which is essentially their job is to figure out why the AI has gone against the 3 laws, right? Like, so essentially in the iRobot book series, and I think they have used it in every other, or not every other, they make a throwback to the books in a lot of sci-fi. It's known as the positronic brain, which is referred to as a artificial brain that's kind of mapped based on the human brain. I know they've used the positronic brain in, like, as a term in, I think, Star Trek, and that's a throwback to iRobot. But essentially, like, you know, her job in the book is just to find out, okay, why have these robots not followed the 3 laws of robotics, and trying to figure it out. And I think her character is in iRobot for a little bit, so you can kind of imagine iRobot being like, again, as you mentioned, like a vignette, like a slice of that particular world, where the 3 laws of robotics exist. And yeah, it does really well. But yeah, it's like, again, with in relation to something like Altered Carbon, like, yeah, it could be the same, but I mean, you know, maybe like it gives it enough of a breathing room to do like a season 2, season 3. Maybe they might do the classic like Harry Potter thing and split the last book into 2 seasons. You know, who knows if they really want to stretch it out. But I think Netflix does a really good thing where they're like, yeah, we'll just do enough. You know, like, not necessarily with their original content, like, you know, something like Stranger Things. I can imagine that going on for like a few more seasons.
I think they said, like, yeah, we want to go to season 4. I'm like, okay,
4.
like,
yeah,
you're planning ahead here, but still.
Yeah, it seems like a season too long kind of thing. Like, it needs like maybe 1 more season and leave it at that. But with something like Altered Carbon, I think when they do adaptations, they're a lot less. You know, they don't stretch it out as much. But I mean, who knows? I look forward to season 2 and what that would be about. What about yourself? Any final thoughts about Ulta Carbon?
Yeah, I thought it was pretty good show. I think it's worth your time watching. It reminds me of all these like sci-fi shows that I haven't even touched yet. Like I haven't watched The Expanse or Dark Matter or like Killjoys, and those are all made from actually the Sci-Fi Network, and I've heard they're all pretty solid shows.
Yeah, I mean, I think The Expanse was my number one returning
yeah, it was
series from last year.
Yeah.
And I just suddenly picked that up again because I totally didn't know season 2 came out, and it was pretty good. So yeah, watch it.
Yeah, I'll definitely get on that. But yeah, Ulta Carbon, I guess, is kind of like, once again, I haven't watched any of that stuff I haven't watched any of that stuff, but like this is pretty solid. It looks pretty good for like, I'm assuming the budget that they have. Like I don't feel like it looked bad at all. I really did like there's a lot of colorful tinges for some of the frames and like the shots that they have, which is really good. But once again, overall it's a pretty solid show. Don't try to get in there and be like, oh man, this is like the next Blade Runner. It's just, it's just part of the genre. It's good times. So that would be Ulta Carbon.